Welcome, everyone. My name is Melanie Linder. I'm Vice President for Marketing and Communications here at UND. Welcome to our third town hall in what has been a most unusual year. Things are going to be a little different as we kick off the town hall. There's a fire alarm that went off in Twomley Hall, and so President Armacost, who normally kicks off our meeting, had to exit the building along with Vice President Shivers. Oh, there he is. I see President Armacost, and Peter Johnson has joined us now as well. So since you've been able to join us, Andy, why don't I kick it off to you?
Great, thanks, Melanie. And we're sitting in the parking lot of Twomley Hall in my car. You can't tell because of the nice background. Peter Johnson's with me, and Jed Shivers as well is in the back seat. We're all vaccinated, of course, so CDC guidelines permit us to be in close company like this. Hey, I just wanted to begin by saying congratulations on the completion of one of the craziest years that we will probably ever see. And so I appreciate the great support from across the campus, faculty, staff members. You've just done amazing work in really uncertain times, and you've really put some great feeling on the campus in terms of supporting your students. Hold on, I think we're going to get a little feedback.
You put yours on mute there, Jen?
It is muted.
Okay. Can you turn the volume down?
I'll try.
All right, we're getting some things worked out. All right, so just my gratitude to each and every one of you for doing great things this year and really bringing great experiences to your students and making sure that they feel valued, safe, and getting a great learning experience. There's still some uncertainty as we head to the fall semester. We don't know the direction of the pandemic. We're really pressing everybody to get vaccinated. Again, that's a voluntary thing. We can't mandate that, but we can certainly encourage you to do so. This way we can operate as normal in the fall semester. And I think if you see the CDC guidance, they have great diagrams that really talk about the benefits of what happens if you're vaccinated and when are you safe. And under all circumstances and gatherings, the best thing we can do is be vaccinated to keep us and each other safe. So we'll plan to be fully open in the fall semester. As the summer progresses, the pandemic group and the executive council will make smart decisions on behalf of the university, trying to minimize risk for everyone. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but just believe me when I say that the team is working hard to really get through guidance. Last Friday, the governor revoked some executive orders. The CDC keeps monitoring and modifying guidance appropriately. And so our main thing is to keep our eye closely on all that guidance and make a decision that's all the decisions in the best interest of the members of our campus community. But I'm really proud of each of you and our students, how you've come through this year with all the uncertainty. On Saturday, I just wanted to highlight the fact that we celebrated just over 500 of our graduating seniors and our grad students as well in what we called our grad walk. This was a wonderful event put together by our university events and ceremonies group under the direction of Fred Whitman to build a ceremony that would really honor safely all of our graduates. And so it was great to see everyone there congratulating them, looking them in the eye and saying, we're extraordinarily proud of you. So so it was a great event. That each graduate walking across the stage was captured on video, and that will be part of our virtual commencement ceremony, which happens on the 15th of May. So so please tune in and see that ceremony and honor our graduates the right way. And then finally, we've just finished with the legislative session. All in all, if you look at a balance sheet of the activities that happened, I'm happy to report that our fully funded baseline budget for the university is in place. As you recall, the governor had recommended a 7.5% reduction of what the funding formula tells us we should get, and the legislature ended up not reducing us by 7.5%. They kept the full budget in play, both for UND and also for the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. So that's great news. But then in addition, a whole large number of other initiatives were funded as well. And so we were very pleased with what happened. There was, the session wasn't without controversy. There were some debates about our challenge grant program, which had an amendment added to it that really addressed issues of partnerships with with abortion providers in the state of North Dakota, and we're still waiting to see the final outcome of that. It's with the governor right now, and we'll keep the campus posted about the impact of those of any decision or that legislation upon any of your activities as researchers and scholars. And so more to follow on the outcome of that legislation. So with that, let me now turn it back over to, and I don't know if Jed's in the back seat. I think he's probably going to try to MC this thing. Jed, is that true?
That is true.
Okay, so I will shut down now, and my backseat companion will actually take over from here. So Jed, over to you.
Okie dokie.
I guess first question, can people hear me? Because I turned my sound off here. Can you hear me okay? Oh, now I'm getting some. Okay. So I just want to start with a little bit of preface that sort of focus on, where we've been and where we are, because I think it's always valuable to kind of keep that context in mind. So as you know, all of us know who've lived through this, we went through a very, very difficult fall and winter period with all kinds of people getting infected, hundreds and hundreds of people being quarantined and isolated, and both at home and in the hotels that we provided. We had extremely robust contact tracing. We had extremely robust testing. Could we have done more? I think we probably could have, but I think we used every single resource we could lay our hands on to do about as much as we could. And our rules were clear. It was a very rather actually unambiguous time. You knew what the rules were. You knew what you had to do as an institution and by and large as individuals. One of the really cool things I think that's coming out now is the notion that with so many of us being vaccinated, so I should tell you that I'm sitting here in the President Mobile with the President and Peter Johnson and I, and we're all vaccinated, right? So we don't feel like we're in ever-present danger to each other. But nonetheless, so many of us are now vaccinated. I think it's likely that we probably won't reach the levels of vaccination that we would love to see, but we're probably going to get close, and we can turn to Josh Wynn for that, his opinion on that subject. But I think the key thing is, things are opening up. And with that opening up is going to become, for a while, a sense of not clarity and some ambiguity as we all try and figure out what the rules are and what institutions could do. So I think one of the basic messages in what is really fundamentally good news is that because of the increasing vaccination and the much lower case rate that we're experiencing right now, is that we're asking, you want to probably just exercise some patience as we work our way through, the changes that are taking place as we all start to open up a bit here. So with that, I think now I usually have 3 screens that I run in order to do a good job of this. And right now I have my little laptop here in the back seat of the car. Notice how I sit in the back seat, that's okay. So
First come, first serve.
yeah, there's the cheap seats being heard from. So so I think I do see one question and answer, and so let me just read that. It said, this is to President Armacost. A few moments ago, you mentioned that the campus will be fully open during the fall semester. Because we cannot expect everyone will be vaccinated, what, if any, precautionary measures will be taken, implemented during the fall?
Okay, thank you. Again, the number one protection we have against the spread of this pandemic are vaccinations. And so, so you're right, knowing that not everybody's going to do it. I think there are still some safe precautions we can take advantage of. The things that the CDC has been highlighting for a while, including hand washing and wearing masks when you're in the presence of others who you don't know if they're vaccinated, those are still great precautions. Now, the question is whether we'll have a mask mandate on campus or mandate other behaviors, such as 6-foot distancing. It's likely that that we will ease some of those restrictions, but as I said earlier, it's still unfolding in time, and the guidance that we're getting from the CDC is being updated. The guidance we're getting from state health is being updated as well. And so we'll be very patient as we make calls for what we think is going to be safe for the fall semester. And again, as far as mask mandates right now, we don't know what's going to be the mandate in the fall. Over the summertime, we'll expect people to continue to wear their masks and face coverings. But in the fall semester, TBD. I think by the 1st of August, we'll be able to make that call about masks. But in terms of density of the classrooms, we're planning on being back to the density that we saw pre-pandemic. We think that's a safe bet at this point, but we'll monitor and keep you updated. I know Dr. Nguyen might have some additional comments from a medical provider's perspective.
Thanks, President Armacost. What I would add to that is that, as you said, UND under your leadership will use CDC guidelines and Department of Health guidelines, but there is going to be regional variability that we're going to see, so that UND's plans will be dependent, I would predict, based on what's going on, at least for the main campus in Grand Forks, as to what's happening in Grand Forks. It may be different in Williston, and it may be different in New York City. So while the guidelines will be helpful, I think that President Armacost will be making those decisions based on what's going on in our community. And as he said, to some degree, we just have to wait to see what evolves. But certainly the trajectory is good as far as the people who've been vaccinated. I would just echo and support his plea for those of you who have not been to get vaccinated and to do your job as educators to try to respectfully interact with others who may be on the fence to help answer queries they may have about being vaccinated. Remember, most of the people who are hesitant are simply hesitant. They're not opposed. And an example is often a good way of convincing people that it's the right thing to do. So thank you, President Armacost.
Great, thanks, Dr. Nguyen. And let me stress, one of the most important things we can do is when we have solid information, we will communicate with you, just as we've done the entire year. I've been so impressed with all of the Healthy Hawks information that's been put on our website. Thanks to Vice President Linder and her staff for making that happen. But all that information is the result of the work of our pandemic that's been meeting since March 11th of last year. And they've done a great job talking through issues, putting policy proposals forward, and then we adopt them and communicate them. So you rest assured that we will communicate heavily with you through the end of this semester, but also through the entire summer to make sure you have the information that you need.
Okay, thank you. One of the delightful things which I like so much is people do have questions about things that are not strictly related to the pandemic, which we will most definitely get to. I just want to keep the theme a little.
Jed, you're muted.
Do it. Okay, can you hear me now? Great, sorry. Okay, so we're just, the crazy part is that the Twomley has moved back into the building, but we're still sitting out here in the car to provide you with continuity. So no sacrifice is too great. Anyway, so one of the questions, which I think is a really wonderful one, is, and again, keeping on the pandemic theme for a minute, what, if anything, specifically, can we as faculty and staff do to ensure the fall semester goes off well? Apart from getting vaccinated, of course. And I think, President Armacost, you want to address that question?
Are you muted? No, you were muted, did you?
They muted us. All right, still having technical difficulties. I think one of the main things to do for faculty members is to prepare your courses as you would in a normal semester, with the same sense of innovation and interaction with your students, but also do so with the notion of uncertainty in mind, and just knowing that there could be unknown twists thrown into the semester, as has happened in the past. And then finally, I think there are probably things faculty members have learned in the online setting that might translate nicely to your in-classroom setting, that you might be able to augment the work that you're doing in the class with good online experiences. And so I like to think that education is not an either or proposition, either in person or online, but it's a combination of the two. So look for ways to kind of synergize the work that you've done in those two different worlds. And Jeff Holm might have some additional comments too. So Dr. Holm.
Thank you, President Armacost. I agree. I think that one of the really exciting things coming out of this will be to see how creative faculty are able to put these different skills, different modalities together. I think the idea of online education and on-campus education, those boundaries are totally blurred now. And I really think that is yesterday's way of talking about education. And tomorrow's way of talking about education will be to kind of serve students. And we talked about this in the task force on the future of higher education, but to serve students as flexibly as possibly, to provide them what they need to make their way through kind of down their academic journey. So I really encourage you, if you have questions about that, want some assistance, Tada is ready anytime over this summer. Be glad to work with you.
And then one final component too. Human interaction is a wonderful thing. And whether you're on campus or online, finding ways to make that connection. I think if anything we learned over the last year of the importance of doing that. So redouble your efforts to figure out ways to make that deep personal impact on each and every one of your students. I've always challenged faculty. I always challenge you to know them by less than 2, but that might be an impossible task. Nonetheless, make the effort to get to know them as individuals. I think education happens best in those close personal connections. So make the efforts to do that.
Even sitting together in a car during a Zoom.
Okay, I see one or two more pandemic questions, and I'll come back to those. But I just wanted to address some non-pandemic questions, and some of them are far-reaching, and I think personally quite interesting. So, but let's go to one that here's a question: are there clear indications of the next biennium budget based on legislative bills or conversations? Sorry. The thing just clicked out of my vision, so I'm going to see if I can find it again. One moment, please. Uh-oh, it's gone. Maybe somebody wrote it, but anyway, I think the essence of the question was, do we know what's going to happen in the biennium following this one? Well, the generic answer to the question is, it really is a function of what the forecast is for the state's economy. And they do that they really come to a final decision during the session in the March timeframe. And one of the really dramatic things, which I've talked about in other meetings, is the extent to which that forecast changed from a fairly pessimistic forecast in the fall to a much more optimistic forecast in the spring. But that shows you the dynamic nature of the forecasting that goes on when the state's economy is concerned. And of course, the reason for that is that when you're highly dependent upon commodities such as agricultural commodities and oil, you're subject to market fluctuations that, that other states may not experience quite as much. So the answer is, it really is going to depend upon what that forecast does at that time. However, I think one extremely interesting development that occurred, which could bode well for higher education and UND, is there was some real discussion about developing a stabilization fund for higher education. And I believe that is a matter which will be a matter of study in the legislative session period. And I think that's a very important development. Such a stabilization fund already exists for K-12. It would mean setting aside some dollars, hopefully not a carve out of our current budget, but rather in addition to the budget for such a stabilization fund, which would probably grow over time. And I think that's a very significant development because it would tend to blunt some of these fluctuations that we experience as a function of each biennia's forecast. So hopefully that's answered your question enough. Next question I'm going to turn to, I think, President Armacost.
Can I answer the other one?
Oh, please, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I think you can hear me. There were several key items that I thought struck me as a result of this legislative session. The first was the great respect and appreciation that has been placed into the funding formula for higher ed. So this has been the efforts of the interim Committee on Higher Education over the last, 8 years or so. And Representative Mark Sanford has been critical to its development. And what I saw was a very strong deference to the methodology and to the results of that funding formula. So to the extent that that we get the revenues that Vice President Shivers talked about, the way that it's allocated, there's a real appreciation among the legislature. So that, I think, offers some predictability for the future. The second area that I thought was really important is the commitment by the state to use a portion of the legacy fund earnings. So the legacy fund is this big pot of money that has been created by largely oil revenues. And the question always arises, what do they use that money for? And so the good news is the decision was made in this biennium to use a portion of those funds for research activities at our universities. And so this is a really good sign for the future as well, that it's now in. It's been about a 4-year journey to get that into the budget. I think it's a good, strong statement for what will happen in subsequent biennia.
Thanks, President Armacost. Another quick item that I think is an interesting question, and I'm going to address this one to President Armacost as well. What are your thoughts on President Biden's proposal for free community college? And if something like that passes, how may it impact enrollment/budgets at UND?
Okay. I can barely see the screen because it's so bright in here. You can see because I'm glowing. Yes, so President Biden's proposal to fully fund community colleges has gotten the attention of the university system. I was on a call this morning with the chancellor and one other 4-year school within our system. And we're concerned about the impacts of enrollments on the 4-year schools. However, that concern is premature because we don't know what the proposal looks like. Right now, it was articulated in a speech, and there's been no firm proposal to back it up. So we're eager to hear what the details are, and also to hear. I know that the Association of Public Land Grant Universities, APLU, has weighed in already to the White House almost immediately about this proposal and what it would mean on 4-year colleges. So we'll wait and see. We're concerned with what we heard on the surface, but often as policymakers go, what actually emerges is quite different. And we'll keep you posted on what we hear. But it definitely caused our ears to perk up.
Thank you. So another question, sort of a thematic question of a couple of questioners. Seeing the three of us here in the car is about people coming back to work. And I'll summarize it with one question. If the campus plans to be fully operational in the fall semester, and I think it's fair to say that we absolutely do plan to do that, will you be requiring any staff who are working from home to be back in the office full time? So let me try and answer that. The interesting thing about the pandemic, of course, as we've seen across America and across the world to a certain extent, is the fact that it enables people to work by not physically being in their office via Zoom. And of course, unless there's a fire drill and you have to sit in a car, it actually works quite well. And even in a car, it's working well. So, you know, I think it gives all places of work a certain degree of additional flexibility, keeping in mind that we have to constantly be aware that, you know, we have to understand that there has to be the same level or better productivity and the accountability for people doing their work when they are utilizing the greater flexibility. So in my mind, to answer your question, that's really a decision that each manager makes in terms of what's appropriate for that job, right? And what's the best match between the job, the person doing it, and the circumstances that they're in. So there are some jobs, I'll say in my division, that are really jobs that have no forward-facing, you know, no front-facing activity. They don't interact with students or faculty or staff in any particular way. And so if that manager said, hey, you know, my folks could work remotely because it works great for them, I get all the productivity and accountability I want. In fact, more so, it's working out even better than it did before. I would certainly be, you know, open to that continuing to occur for some period of time. Maybe indefinitely. I think that's something that we'll have to see. On the other hand, there are other managers who will say, you know what, this job actually requires a person to be at work. It is the nature of the position that requires on-campus physical presence. Well, that's going to really drive the bus. So it's those conversations between supervisors and staff, management and staff, et cetera, really be determining this. But I think the key aspect here is let's think creatively, but also responsibly, and try and make use of this additional flexibility that we have. I think in some cases, the ability to recruit and retain extremely high quality people who are going to be working remotely is going to provide us with a very significant advantage and tends to overcome, I think, what we would acknowledge are the occasional difficulties we have in recruiting people to Grand Forks. So, you know, let's make use of that flexibility, but keep in mind the principles of the required productivity and accountability. I think Dr. Armacost also wants to comment.
I think we also need to recognize that our business is a human endeavor, and it's easy to, I think, easy to say, oh, I'm more productive at home because I can just get stuff done. We should always remember that there are important connections that happen across the campus within our offices. Even if you're not a student-facing function, the relationships that you have with your colleagues are important to getting the work of the university done. And so let's not underestimate the power of these connections. And when we're together, we tend to be more innovative. We tend to have conversations. I know this for a fact. I look at my own office, and the conversations we're having by being together are far richer, they're more spontaneous, they're far more effective than they were when we were all working by a distance. And so there's a power there. And when you're dealing with creating new educational programs for students and delivering the next generation of leaders for our society, there's something about being together that's really important. So I echo what Jed said, but in addition, it's not, we can't take a mechanistic look at production lines and say I'm productive and therefore I'm going to stay home. Being together is what we do, and I ask supervisors to really consider the power of the team in the work that we do as you're making your decisions about that remote work.
Thank you. So keeping in mind that sort of humanistic perspective, I want to go to the next question, again, not pandemic related, not money related, but rather, and I think this is for President Armacost. Thank you very much for establishing inclusion ambassadors throughout the UND campus. I am very grateful for our university's emphasis on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Would you be willing to comment on your vision about how the inclusion ambassadors will work on intersectionalities and multiple types of diversity, including not only racial and ethnic diversity, but also other facets of diversity, such as supporting the LGBTQ+ members of our community?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I give full credit to Professor Tom Bailey and Provost Debbie Storrs for creating the notion of the inclusion ambassadors, and kudos to all the deans for adopting this program and actually building these ambassadors within the walls of their colleges and schools. So you hit on all the great points that all types of diversity matter to this institution. And I think having the connection to where our educational programs are delivered is an essential piece to making that happen. So, so both in terms of the education, but also what happens and the human relationships that exist within each of those colleges, I think is essential. So hats off to the ambassadors program. I'll leave my comments at that. I wish Debbie were here. She's on travel today, but she could actually give some more information about the program. But as that program becomes more robust, we'll make sure perhaps a UND Today article will share more information about the value that we're deriving from that program.
Thank you, President Armacost. I'm laughing. I think this is a good one. So let me just read it for the interest. On a lighter note, once there is no mask mandate and social distancing is less than 6 feet, it will be fun to have a graduation mask day on campus with all the colleges having their faculty, staff, and students throwing their masks in the air like it was graduation day. Just a fun thing to do for what we have all experienced at the outbreak. Yeah, the question is who's going to clean it all up, says the person in charge of maintenance. But, you know, yeah, I think at a certain point in time, there will come a day when we feel fairly back to normal, where the virus will never be gone, but it'll be a background element in our lives as opposed to a foreground element in our lives. And I would hope that we would mark those days in some way, not only for the freedom that it provides us, but also to just, you know, remark upon the efforts of our entire community to get through this in the way we've gotten through this so far. So it's a really nice note to think about, and I'm looking forward to that time. A couple of items. So this is sort of a difficult topic, I think. But one question is, this relates to 2030 and specifically the language about Planned Parenthood. And I think, you know, there's a certain amount of understanding about it, probably some degree of misinformation about it. But one of the questions is if SB 2030 is signed into law. So here, keep in mind, this is currently with the governor having been passed by the legislature. I'm not sure anyone knows whether the governor will sign it or veto it or what. That's his prerogative, or if he'll line item veto it, so we'll see. If it's signed into law, will faculty be provided with guidance on how the amendment of the bill targeting abortion-related issues may impact faculty's teaching on such topics? So I'm sorry to turn this into the constant President Armacost show, but let me just turn to you, President Armacost, and see if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I do. In my opening comments, I did make a remark about this, that as we learn more about 2030, we owe you information about how it impacts your scholarship, your class projects, your what you teach in the class, and we will engage whatever legal counsel we need to make sure that we have a good, clear reading about the impacts. So the answer is yes, but let's stay tuned and see what the final legislation looks like when it comes out of the governor's office. I don't want to jump to conclusions on what we're going to see, but we'll be prepared to give you information. Absolutely.
So quick question is, will there be employee raises this year? Good question. Answer is yes. So I'll explain it as clearly as I can, but it'll be with the proviso that I'm speaking on the basis of verbally derived understanding, and we haven't seen anything yet in writing. That's probably because those bills that relate to those things are still awaiting gubernatorial signature. So the basic idea for the first year is that all eligible employees, faculty, etc., will receive basically a $100 a month payment. To be eligible, one must have an acceptable, satisfactory merit review and have a merit review. okay? So that's sort of like the baseline. That means that people making less than $80,000 a year will actually get an increase of slightly greater or much greater than 1.5%. So that's that portion of it. That's a minimum. There's no maximum. So everybody who's eligible is going to get $100 a month. We have made the determination that our faculty are 1 FTE faculty, and so they will get $100 a month times 12 months, not times 9 months. So they will receive a $1,200 base merit pool. Now, what happens for the people who are at the $80,000 and over level? Nominally, that would suggest that everybody else is going to have less than 1.5% to work with, because that money shifts over to people under 80,000. That's not the case. To the extent that it pays for it, which is about a third of the total, the state's appropriated additional dollars to make the merit pool whole at 1.5%. The university, through all of its revenue generating entities, will do the same. So everyone else will have the 1.5% pool to work with, less the $100 a month. So what will really happen is you'll need to distribute this in a good pragmatic fashion as merit, not as a COLA, as merit, but recognizing that you'll really have fairly small dollars to work with. So that's the best way I have to explain it. In year 2, it's a 2% merit pool. It's strictly a merit pool. It'll go along, normal guidelines. There are those who wish us to give a shout out to the CIO and UIT for having the foresight to know that someone would need great Wi-Fi in the parking lot. So I do shout out to them, but I also say that I'm using my phone as a hotspot. So, but I think Peter is using the Wi-Fi because he trusts things. Let's see. At this point, I'm sort of not seeing any questions that I haven't dealt with either directly or indirectly. Are there any other questions that people are seeing that we need to address at this time? Melanie, are you seeing any, or David, are you seeing any additional questions that we need to address? Oh,
No.
more? We're looking.
Hi, Jed. I think you've hit all the ones that I see on the screen, so you're doing well there. There are a few comments, but no questions that you haven't dealt with so far.
Yeah, Dave, hey, this is Andy again. There was one question that came my way about, has there been any effort by UND leadership to communicate opposition to bills that will impact our ability to hire talented faculty members? Specifically bills that make our state less inclusive and less friendly to a diverse workforce. On those, we did lots of work with individual legislators. I had actually drafted a note to the Appropriations Committee on the House side as well to talk about the impact of the amendments to 2030 on several facets of how we operate, including the impact on our research programs, the impact on ability to attract talented faculty because of state policies or state laws. So those conversations happen in a variety of settings. They happen by phone, they happen in person, but we strongly advocated, not just me, but other members of the team, with our legislators to get information about good decision making. On the transgender bill, there were lots of discussions with the system office as well, the NDUS. They had a number of staff members putting together a well-crafted argument about that bill, and we provided direct input to them and said, here are some additional points we think you should make. But all in all, it was a real team effort. It wasn't, the presidents came together on a number of issues as well, specifically on 2030. We fed information to the chancellor and to the board chair that they included in a note to the entire assembly as well. And so just there's a whole variety of ways where you try to influence decisions, but also respect the power and the decision-making authority that's vested in the state legislature. So it's a very it's an important dialogue to have, and I think your leadership across the board at UND did a great job this year, engaging and providing information and really trying to get the legislators to understand the various positions that are out there. So all in all, again, we're still waiting for the final word on the bill 2030, but again, we'll get information out about as that one's passed, what it means to the campus.
Okay, we do have a couple of additional questions besides the should we start up a car karaoke type of thing. And that is a budgetary question, and then a sort of activities of daily living question where I get to turn a question over to someone other than President Armacost. Woo! So let's do the budget question first. How will the recent budget questions effectively affect previously discussed programs like building renovations, et cetera? Will those be on schedule or will they be delayed? So I can answer that question. You know, really, the stuff that we're working on right now continues. So, you know, you're going to see the Memorial Union come up and be done this summer. You're going to see Nistler come up and be done the following year. You're going to see continuing renovation work being done on the academic buildings with the resources that we have at hand. The one thing that you won't see is any activity taking place with regard to Merrifield Twomley, at least as much as we know right now. We got authorization for the $79 million, but no funding. So that's something that we'll probably have to work on for the next biennium. And, you know, we would have loved to have started the design and construction, design work on that and try and get to bid documents for that building, that project. But, you know, we'll see whether or not we're able to do that. I'm not so sure. But I think all the stuff that you're seeing taking place around campus will continue because that's really being done with existing resources. So I hope that that answered that question. One of the questions, and here I'm going to turn to Karen Plum and Kara Halgren, is what will the summer look like? It's a nice question. And so let me turn to the two of you, and if you could both comment, please.
Sure. So I'll take the course section and then I'll turn it over to Kara for events and things that are coming up in the summer. So our courses will be mostly online for the summer. If you all remember, we kind of had this stoplight analogy in terms of coming back for the fall, and for summer we're in that yellow light kind of area. So courses will mostly be online, but that's not atypical. Most of our courses are online over the summer, even when we're not in a pandemic. We will be working with our new students coming in to get them registered, and then they will have the option to come to an event for our UND orientation days in July. So we're starting to see more activity. It won't be full blown back to normal like we'll see in the fall, but I think we'll slowly start to see some of that activity. And some of that activity will be impeded by a lot of construction that will be happening on campus over the summer. So campus will definitely look a little bit different, but I think we'll start to see more people around campus in the summer. Kara, did you want to talk about some of the events?
Sure, thanks, Karen. So just kind of reiterating what Karen said, we have students here on, during the summer. And so that being said, our residence halls will be open, our dining center will be open, we'll be welcoming new students to campus in July in anticipation of having them here at the end of August. So really for students, I think they're looking forward to being on campus, looking forward to what's happening this fall, and we are gearing up to do the best that we can to help them feel acclimated and comfortable with being on campus. I think one of the big things that we haven't talked much about today, but we anticipate probably mid-July that the union will open up again. And obviously we are very excited about that and what that'll mean to density on campus. And I know that we have a lot of students who are excited about that as well. So while we may have fewer students on campus, it's still going to be an exciting time at the university.
Thank you, Kara and Karen. So another question for Kara. There's a couple of questions here that really are seem to revolve around the same thing, which is one is any decision on dorms and housing this year, any updates, and are residence halls still going to be renovated?
You know, that is a question near and dear to my heart. So we are having conversations right now talking about what the housing should look like, or what the future of housing is at the University of North Dakota. We are proud of the experience that students have in our residence halls, and we've been talking a lot about providing the physical space that matches what happens inside. And so we're not quite there yet, but I anticipate within the next couple of weeks that we'll have some more solid information for the community about next steps on this. But just know that there are a lot of us talking about it. It's a very exciting time, and hopefully look forward to having some news to share in the near future.
Thank you, Kara. I did see, here we go. Thank you. This is for, I think, primarily President Armacost, but others may want to comment as well. Thank you for your comments on the legislation regarding transgender students. What steps could the university take to make our UND students who are transgender feel more welcome within our community? And I think that would be a good one, not only for President Armacost, but for Karen Plum and Kara Hallgren as well.
Can't even see. Hold on. I'm really blinded by the sunlight. I'm sorry about that. I think the question was specifically about our transgender students. Correct. Yeah. I think one of the most important things each of us can do is understand what it means to be transgender. In other words, there are some great programs out there offered by our Student Diversity Office on ally training. And this is for the whole LGBTQIA community. You can learn a lot. Jeff gave a great session a couple weeks ago. I attended, and you learn a lot about the history, about particular struggles and ways that allies can actually help. And so one of the most important things we can do is have that sense of understanding of our transgender students. And I'll just say this, while the idea of being transgender might be mysterious to those, to cisgender people, it's first and foremost important for you to recognize fellow human beings and treating them with the respect that they deserve. And so ally training is one step, but if you have a transgender student, make sure you don't shy away from creating a good, positive relationship with those students, those faculty members, those staff members. And so again, just keeping at the forefront of every one of your actions and your statements, the sense of humanity and dignity that we owe each other. And let me turn it over to the others for their comments.
So I'll just jump in, and I'm not sure if people are aware of this, so I'll just do a plug, but Jeff and Stacy and our student diversity and inclusion folks do a great job of, as President Armacost said, providing education and training around these issues. If you didn't know it, that Jeff is available to do things in terms of departments and smaller groups. So again, if this is something that you would want to have a larger discussion with your department about, this is something that could happen. One of the things that I find is that sometimes people, they want to know more, but they're just afraid to ask the question because they don't know that they're asking the question right or respectfully. And one of the things that I so admire about Jeff is his ability to create opportunities for that discussion where people can learn, and they can learn without feeling uncomfortable or embarrassed about what they're talking about. And so again, it's an opportunity to learn. When I hear students talk about their experiences on campus, they have great, I've heard students talk about great sincere appreciation for faculty and staff and students who do try and learn about what their experiences might be like and how to make their life a little better on campus. And so again, I think that there's an opportunity for all of us in this. So that's what I would add.
We've got a quick question on Jeff's last name and his contact information, so we could invite him to speak with our departments. Could we write that? Just put it on the chat, maybe.
I will include it in the chat right now.
Thank you. Okay. Here's we're going to do some just some quick ones in our. We got about like 7 or 8 more minutes. Can you share where the funds are coming from for all the new building going on? It seems that there is unlimited funds for new building and very little for keeping what we have up to date. So truth is that the big projects that we're doing, so for example, the Memorial Union is funded, the vast majority is funded by an increase in student fees, especially for the purpose of defraying the bond that supports that construction. The steam plant was done pretty much as an internally funded bond deal by altering the economics by using a cheaper commodity and improving the delivery of energy across the campus.
Cheaper commodity, what do you mean by that?
Natural gas versus the very expensive transportation of coal. The Nistler was basically funded $20 million from the state and $50 million from our wonderful philanthropic community, thus not having any kind of debt burden or anything associated with it, as is the case with most of our appropriated buildings. But in fact, we do renovate, and so one of the principles of that renovation is every time we raise tuition, so let's say we raise tuition 3% or 4%, whatever it turns out to be, one of those points goes to accumulating an annual depreciation fund that we utilize in conjunction on a 2-for-1, us 2, state 1 match basis for extraordinary repairs, which we use to really, fix up our academic buildings. It's really all about the academic buildings. And so that in conjunction with about $40 million from the steam plant bond, which is also being used to fix up the energy systems inside the academic buildings, plus some money that we've gotten from COVID dollars where we were allowed to improve air handling systems also for the academic buildings, is really what's driving the ongoing improvement in operations and maintenance and driving down the deferred maintenance. So in fact, I'm going to argue that we do actually spend quite a bit of money in keeping up what we have, but there's a long way to go. And one of the realities will be the continuing consolidation of our campus, the reduction of square footage, and the destruction of older outmoded buildings. Montgomery Hall being a good example of that. Now going up in its place, really a spectacular Nistler College of Business and Public Administration. So hopefully I've answered that question. Let's see, there's a question on staff recognition for 20 and 21, and I'm going to defer that to Peggy. We'll ask her to provide information because I'm ashamed to say I'm not sure I know the definitive answer, even though I probably should. So when Peggy returns, we'll let her provide that answer. Any direction on planning in-person events for the fall semester? So I'm going to turn to Kara, and I think Cassie is also on. I think basically the idea here is, we're hoping that the campus in the fall functions as normally as possible, but let me turn to those folks and ask them to comment.
I would agree. I think that's exactly it. And, one of the things that's happened even this semester during COVID is that we've had students that have wanted to stay involved and do things. And I know that there's a tech bingo session coming up in the near future where you will see lots of students who want to get involved and do things. So we're hoping that this fall there are opportunities for people to do that more so in person. But again, it is the ongoing concern that we want people to be connected. We know that connected students are happier students and have a better experience here. We just hope that come fall we'll be able to connect in a different kind of way than we have been over the last 12 months. But I'm also going to turn it over to Cassie Gerhardt because I think she just jumped on as well.
just to follow up and to add to what Dr. Hogridge said, we're already talking about what is Welcome Weekend and what can we do to welcome not just the students who will join us for the first time in the fall as new students, but the students who will join us for the first time because they maybe weren't on campus this past year. So talking about welcome back activities and things for the fall, we will follow the event guidelines that are developed as we think about the fall semester. So lots of activities. I know a number of the folks who do programming around campus have met to talk about different things we could offer with a goal of having something going on campus for the first 83 or 100 days, whether that is programs and activities associated with the academic environment, the wellness center, the student union, student organizations. So lots of activities, and if people have suggestions, we are always open to hear them.
Thank you. Quick question for Karen Plum. Will students still have the option of pass-fail any of their classes, including major requirements classes like they had for the past semesters?
That's a great question. In the future, we do not plan to alter our SU grading policy. We saw some pretty negative repercussions for students that were choosing a lot of SU and how that affects their ability to use financial aid and their GPA moving forward. So we do not plan to make any changes to the policy. The policy as it is, students can elect SU grading. They can't choose that within their major requirements, and they can't choose that if they are a freshman student, so they have earned less than 24 credit hours. So students should always check with their advisors or their faculty before they look at requesting to elect an SU grade.
Thank you, Karen. Quick question for Deanna. For our alumni folks, we send a lot of folks to the NHL. Do we see a return from our amazing hockey program?
Good afternoon. Yes, and AD Bill Chaves can jump in here too if he wants, but we do have a number of our alumni hockey letter winners who have established endowments, generally for scholarships that help support incoming student athletes. But also get involved in other ways with gifts back for equipment and other programming needs.
Thanks, Deanna. And Jed, I'll add in, we're one of the few schools in the country that all three assistant coaches are alums of the University of North Dakota. And so just with that connectivity with all the eras, for sure, we're in constant contact with them. And Coach Barry does a great job, as well as Jackson and Gary.
Thank you. Quick question on the American Indian Center, and I think let's start with Kara, if that's okay, and Cassie, and we'll see who else wants to respond. Question is, what is the status of the American Indian Center? During a recent forum with tribal college presidents, they indicated one thing UND could do in ensuring Indigenous students have a dedicated space staffed with people who understand their needs and experiences. Are there serious discussions occurring how to meet these needs and to return the center for exclusive use of Indigenous students?
So the American Indian Center will continue to operate as it has. And at this point, Student Diversity and Inclusion is looking to post a position specifically for staffing that space. When the Memorial Union opens, the Student Diversity and Inclusion staff as a larger group will move to the union. But again, that doesn't change the American Indian Center space or what it will be used for.
Thank you. We now are pretty much at the end of our hour. I want to turn this over to President Armacost for his closing comments, and then he may want to answer the question, which will be our last one. Will you hire a vice president for diversity?
Here we go. I think you can hear me now. Right, so to the question of the Vice President for Diversity, I think a position like that will be central to all of our efforts on campus to move forward with some of the strategic initiatives and leading those initiatives across the campus and working closely with all the different units at UND. And so I've begun the process. We're drafting a position description for the Chief Diversity Officer, no sense on the timing. I'd like to move quicker than slower on this one. I think it's an important element of our campus, and it's something that's been, I think, missing from our leadership portfolio. And this chief diversity officer would report directly to the president, and then work closely with all the other vice presidents to make sure the initiatives that we have for DEI go forward and make a huge impact on our campus. So in closing, let me just thank everybody for tuning in. And I know this has been, again, a crazy year. You've stuck with it. You've shown great grace, great endurance, and we've gotten through it. So, but it's not over, as I said to start the discussion. We still have work to do to make sure that we monitor the pandemic, that we come out of it, and we keep focusing on the health and safety of our campus. And again, let me encourage everybody, if you haven't gotten vaccinated, please do so. That will really make a difference. Encourage our students to get vaccinated as well. So keep in mind all the graduates who are graduating on the 15th of May, keep them in your thoughts. And we know that they're going to go out and make a huge difference in our world, thanks to all the work that you've done to get them there. So congratulations all. Enjoy the rest of the day.